Hello everyone, my name is Jocelyn and welcome to the video that I kind of didn't really want to have to make. In a previous video I made the ridiculous statement that if anybody wanted to hear my thoughts on the whole Vaush situation, to just leave me some comments down below, and I thought, nah, no one's actually going to want to hear that. Turns out at least 2 people did, so here we are. But I don't want to jump straight in to that. I need to give a little bit of background and context and everything first. So I'm going to start by talking about Jessie Earl, otherwise known as Transgender on YouTube. She is a very hardworking person. She has not only contributed a lot to her own YouTube channels, in particular 2 videos that I will dive into in a bit more detail, but also she produced this essay for GameStop, of all places, to talk about the upcoming Harry Potter game and how J.K. Rowling's transphobia is kind of unavoidable. It's a brilliant essay, go read it, link in the description. So one of her most recent videos, titled The Crushing Weight of Being Transgender, kind of outlines how the world is a terrible place, especially right now. She's personally dealing with the rampant transphobia that's going around online and off, as well as worries about the Ukraine situation, worries about the pandemic situation, financial hardship because of these particular issues, as well as the background noise of all the war in the Middle East that hasn't gone away, famine, corruption, greed, you know, the business as usual shite. I personally feel like this is a particularly bad time when you have my Prime Minister, the Prime Minister of the UK, hashtag not my Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, literally sucking the toes of Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, just days after a capital punishment sweep executed 81 men. The link to more information about that also down below. That article is very worth a read, because the fact is that there are a lot of crimes in Saudi Arabia that are basically non-crimes. Things like apostasy or homosexuality. But to come back into focus a little bit more, across the US there are several new anti-trans laws that have been made to delegitimize and punish trans people and our allies. Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, which is basically a rehash of Section 28, which I've already lived through, and I can tell you it was not productive, useful, or fun. It's nothing but hurting trans kids. And teachers. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person to make that comparison, but I am not hearing it enough. This country, Turf Island, decided that Section 28 was a bad idea in the early 2000s. Please, Florida, don't do the same fucking thing. But of course, DeSantis is very, very right-wing and is not going to listen to random old me. Then of course you've got places like Texas and Idaho that claim that parents taking their children to therapy for their trans identities, and you know, trans therapy in kids is basically just changing names, pronouns, and clothing. Apparently that's now equivalent to child abuse, according to those states, which doesn't add up. And of course, on this side of the pond, you do have the BBC with its biased coverage against trans people. To use the word catastrophizing would actually be downplaying the seriousness of the suffering of trans people who will be affected by these bills, these laws, and just the general anti-trans sentiment that's flying around at the moment. All of which hasn't been helped by one Madam Joanne Rowling. which is where we get to the other relevant video by Jessie that she produced recently, which is called Misogyny against J.K. Rowling and Transphobes Hurts Us All, which was the response video to the Vaush situation, which he later saw that video and responded to, and that's what I need to talk about. So for those people who don't know, what happened was, on International Women's Day, J.K. Rowling published this wonderfully witty, amazing, smart tweet that's totally not confusing at all, that says, apparently, under a Labour government, today will become We Who Must Not Be Named Day. This was confusing for a few reasons. First of all, this is a hypothetical what if we had a Labour government at the moment. She's not saying that we have a Labour government at the moment. In England and the UK, the government is very conservative. Very, very much the Conservative Party. The point of that tweet was to jab at Keir Starmer again. I've already covered how she's done that before. First of all, by acknowledging trans people's existence doesn't erase women, which is the point that she's getting at. But she's doing it with a Voldemort reference, because, you know, she can do that. She created the character Voldemort. Okay, fine. But he was the evil guy. So is she saying that all women are evil? Quick side note. Has anyone actually seen the second Fantastic Beasts movie? Right at the end bit, where Grindelwald has the audience kind of enthralled by all of the things that are happening in the world, and he's saying that Muggles are going to start World War II, which they do. And you've got the character Queenie, who is so wrapped up in what he's saying, she believes it wholeheartedly, and she throws herself through the flames towards his twisted narrative, because of course not all Muggles were on the wrong side of history there. J.K. Rowling is Queenie in this situation. Like, she's been suckered in by transphobic rhetoric. She's been love-bombed the hell out of by them. And she has flung herself wholeheartedly into this transphobia thing through the flames. And now she's the villain. And she's contributed to that story where it's kind of obvious that that is the villainous side, but she doesn't see it in herself. Like, if this wasn't real life, it would be amazingly good drama. But now that we've got that all out the way, let's carry on with the Vaush situation. So, we know what he said. Tweet is on the screen. I'm just going to say I'm no fan of Vaush. I have watched a few of his things before now, and there's a reason I didn't bother to subscribe. I find his arrogance is off-putting. I'm not sure if this is sort of an act or performative arrogance, or whether it's real. Either way, I don't care for it. He comes across as big-headed, and he makes the whole situation sound like it's all about him. Like, he literally says, quote, "I love my words." What the hell? He also keeps on with this whole victim mindset. Like, he's so victimized because he saw people calling out his bad optics from the left, and oh whoa, everyone blamed him and decried him for giving her and the other transphobes ammunition. That sort of attitude makes it very hard to like him. So in that stream video that he posted, he very quickly judged Jessie, like way too quickly. He said some things that were really inappropriate and untrue about who she might be before he even watched 3 seconds of the video. And he does this in almost the same breath as complaining about the intolerant left that gave him backlash. Now, eventually he does flip, and he does assess that she did a fair job, whilst also claiming numerous times that he doesn't care about good faith arguments. Well, it's kind of difficult to know what you do care about then. And he also accused the leftist detractors of his of defending J.K. Rowling. Now, I don't know how much of that has actually happened, because apparently all of this is on his streams, his comments, and his Twitter threads, and I don't watch him, and I stay the hell away from Twitter because it is a toxic cesspool. But I don't think anybody's really addressed the point that both parties can be in the wrong at the same time. At least up until Jessie Gender's video conclusion. And that is to say that just because one person is shitty, it doesn't justify being shitty back to a whole demographic, even jokingly. I found Vaush very insulting to people who don't agree with him, who aren't being otherwise egregiously confrontational or anything like that. But let's get to his points. So the points were, he says that the point of the original tweet wasn't in fact the misogyny. And he kept saying that a number of times. Wondering who he's trying to convince there. But anyway, let's take him at face value and say that, the point was in fact the method in which he delivered the message. Well, was the misogyny even really necessary then? Because it seems to me that the same kind of method without the same kind of message doesn't really convey the same sort of thing. And it also doesn't seem to have landed with the target as intended. The target here being his audience, not J.K. Rowling. He wasn't trying to talk directly to her. The fact that she saw it was sort of circumstantial happenstance. We'll get to that as well. So from the way he talked about his tweets afterwards, he does explain that the misogyny is ironic. But to readers of the tweets without any context of knowing who he is, like J.K. Rowling or like myself, who, I have seen a few of his things, but I wouldn't say I know what his intention was just from reading the tweets. I probably would have taken that second one as, well, that's really shitty. That's really bad. The first sentiment I can completely agree with. Because it's just about one person who did a bad thing or continues to do bad things, shall we more accurately say. But then targeting all women, which, does include trans women, which he knows, which is why I'm going to believe him when he says it's ironic. But when you communicate with just words, a lot of the context is stripped away anyway. That's why people tend to write in all caps for shouting or emphasis. That's why people alternate between capital and lowercase for silly or sarcasm or someone saying something, stupid. That's why people use grammar to try and convey more meaning than just the words. But this tweet on its own, it didn't seem to land the way it was intended. Also, he says that when he is indirectly referencing her, not addressing her directly, that is still a pretty weak defense, because it's still putting something a message out there into the public sphere. So you're going to see people are going to see it, and it's not just going to be your target audience that sees it, right? And some new audience member who could have been persuaded to go and, watch his stuff might have been very off-put just by that one thing. I don't know if he cares about that or not, but most YouTubers do care about growing their audiences, so that's a thing. Now, he does make a good point that Joanne has a habit of screenshotting and bullying smaller, trans people who you know, say things to her. She bullies them. She gets her turfy mob on them. They end up having to delete their accounts and everything. Like, that does happen. And if it wasn't him, it would have been somebody else, much less capable of taking it and standing up for themselves. Not really, because she does it to other people anyway. So, not really a great defense there. And he does recognize that right-wingers or fascists can make misogynistic or racist jokes, like using irony, just to be able to get away with using the bigotry. Like, the irony is just the thinly veiled part of the actual bigotry, and what they really want to do is just say sexist and racist things. And he also, I think, understands that there is a pipeline of right-wingerdom to fascism that is very much encouraged by that sort of thing. So, again, for him to be using it ironically kind of looks petty, to say the least. Now, his other defense, the fact that the misogyny in question did in fact get him noticed by her, and if he hadn't done it, even though that wasn't his intention, she still noticed and then responded. But of course she responded as if he was serious, and didn't understand the full context of what he was trying to get across, or at least it didn't look like that. He, as far as I'm aware, again, I don't use Twitter, so I don't know how far this whole thing goes down, toxic cesspool, yada yada. He never actively pointed out, and I don't think anybody has actively pointed out, you feeling like this because of the misogyny levied against you is how you make trans people feel when you use transphobia against them and when you say ridiculous things that you don't know anything about. No one, I have not seen anyone say that to her. God, I hope somebody already has. But making the point stand out loud and fucking clear like that is something that needs to happen if it hasn't already. And getting mired in the whole thing of, should he have used this to do this and discourse this and that, and like, that doesn't help that message to get through. Oh, and people can worry about ironic misogyny legitimately, in the same sort of way, when it comes to his audience as when it does to a right-wing audience. And then the final part of Jessie's video is just sort of asking the question, is triggering Joanne justified? Because she won't engage honestly with good faith criticisms. And I've never seen her engage honestly, openly with good faith criticisms. She always points out the bad. She always points out that I'm so victimized by death threats and by, you know, this, that, and the other. And, oh, look at the terrible wokey transes attacking me for saying, like, that they don't exist and that they shouldn't be allowed to do what they need to do. You can't really play victimhood at that. But I've never seen her honestly engage with good faith criticisms, and there have been a lot of those, and she's just chosen to ignore them. And the response from Jessie is that no, triggering JK is not worth it or justified. And Vaush disagrees respectfully and says actually, yes, he thinks it is. Because you can't have reasonable discourse with transphobes and bigots. And unfortunately, that is true. Triggering her was the only way to get her to notice, but it still hasn't fucking helped. So my conclusion is, well, is what Vaush did all that bad? Is it all that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things? Remembering what I said earlier about how the world is an awful place right now? No, it's not. Positives that have come out of this is that he has at least contributed more to the debate, for better or for worse. But by this point, JK has already given herself enough rope to hang herself with. She keeps doing it on a fucking weekly basis at this point. Piling on isn't really going to change that. I think that optically this hasn't done him any favours. Not that I think he cares. But the one person that I have talked about today who is an absolute rock star is, of course, Jessie. So, yeah, she gets my continued support. Anyway, that's what I think. That's my summary of the situation anyway. And until next time, non-binary is still valid, despite what certain children's authors who have fallen from grace might think. God damn it. Shook the camera. Bye.